Welcome back, everybody. Let's continue in our series in Talmud Esher Sefirot. We're in Chelek Aleph, Perek Bet, Inyan Aleph, Ot Dalid. And let's just remind ourselves about the sentence from the Arizal before jumping into the Or Pnimi by Rav Ashlag. Vehine, achar hatzimtzum haniskor la'ayl, after the contraction, asher az nisha'er makom hachalal ve'avir panui ve'rekaini be'emtza or ha'in sof mamash keniskor la'ayl, where in which remained an empty void in the middle of the Ein Sof, literally. Hine kvar haya makom sheyuchlu lihyot sham hanetzalim ve'hanivraim ve'hayetzurim ve'hanaasim. There was already made a place where the emanations, creations, formations, and made entities could exist. Ve'az himshich min or Ein Sof kav echad yashar, and then a singular straight line of light extended from the Ein Sof, mihaor ha'agol shelo, from its circular light, milemala lamata, from above to below, ve'mishtal shel ve'yored toch hachalal hahu. And this line of light sequences its way downward and descends into the midst of the halal, into the midst of the void. Now, the commentary we're going to be reading from Rav Ashlag in the Or Pnimi is specifically regarding the words milemala lemata. What does the Arizal mean when he says that this line of light, which comes from the Or Ein Sof into the halal, extends from above to below? What does that mean, that the line extends from mala lemata? Rav Ashlag begins his commentary. Al tishkach she'ein hakavana chas v'shalom b'musagim hamedumim b'makom gashmi. Rav Ashlag says that don't forget that we are not, God forbid, speaking in terms of physical space or imagery. When we're talking about milamala lamata, from above to below, that seems to imply that there are some sort of directions that exist in spirituality. It sounds like we are ascribing a physical quality of space and directionality to the spiritual. So he is beginning his commentary on this phrase, from above to below, by reminding us that even though it sounds like we are ascribing space and directionality to the spiritual, don't forget that even though it sounds that way, we're not talking about physical space and we're not talking about physical directions. Ela hazach beyoter mechune bechinat mala v'ha'ava v'hagarua beyoter mechune bechinat mata. Rather, above in spirituality refers to what is more refined, and below refers to what is more coarse. The Hebrew terminology for refined and coarse is zach and av, or zakut and aviut. Zakut means purity, thinness, refined, and that in spirituality is what we call above, something that is very spiritually refined and purified from the selfish nature of the desire to receive, is positioned higher up on the hierarchy of levels in the spiritual world. It's positioned higher up in the hierarchy of levels than a desire that contains some sort of desire to receive. An entity that contains some sort of desire to receive is below, it's lower than an entity whose desire has been refined. So just to specify, above and below in spirituality doesn't refer to physical space and hierarchy, but it refers to a qualitative difference in terms of the desire. A refined desire, which is selfless and about giving and sharing, and it's pure, is positioned higher than a desire that is self-serving, selfish, coarse. So that's the difference between above and below in the spiritual dimensions, right? As explained earlier in Perek Aleph Ot Vav, we've explained this. שכל מה שאפשר להבין בהתפשטות האור מהמעציל ובהיותו לבחינת נאצל, הוא בעיקר בבחינת חידוש של שינוי הצורה שישנו בנאצל. All that we can understand about the extension of the light from the ma'atzil, from the emanator, to the emanated, pertains to a chidush, a new aspect. What we call hashinui tzura, the difference in form that occurs in the emanated being. So all of the extension of light that flows from the emanator to the emanated entity pertains to the way that the emanated thing is impacted by the light. And that is called a chidush, a change, a difference. All change and all difference that occurs is from the emanated being's point of view, never from the emanator point of view. And what is it that the emanated being has that is different from the emanator? What is this change? What is this difference that the emanated being has that the emanator lacks? Ratzon lekabel, the desire to receive. Because the emanator only has the desire to give, while the emanated being only has the desire to receive its own sustenance from the emanator. And that desire to receive does not exist in the ma'atzil. So I'm going to start using more Hebrew terminology. Hopefully you're taking notes and you can learn these vocabulary terms in Hebrew, because it's very important to understand these concepts in their original language. So the ratzon lakabel of the ne'etzal is the chidush. It is exactly that bechina, that aspect, which separates it or differentiates it from the ma'atzil. And Rav Ashlag continues, ו'מחמת זה נבחן הנאצל שהוא רחוק. It is because of this shinui tzura that exists within the ne'etzal that regards her as being far from the ma'atzil. Av v'shafal v'tachton kalpei ha'ma'atzil. The ne'etzal is regarded as av, v'shafal, v'tachton in relationship to the ma'atzil. Because it has the ratzon lekabel, the desire to receive, which is what we call aviyut. And aviyut, as we just explained a few sentences ago, means that that entity is positioned below, lower, in relationship to that entity which does not have the desire to receive, who is completely pure and refined, which is the matzil, the emanator, which is why he is positioned above. So the ne'etzal is more av, it's more shafal, and it's more tachton in relationship to the matzil, because the ne'etzal has the desire to receive, and the matzil does not have any desire to receive. Ki shinui hatsura mehamatzil ose kol elu. Because change in form from the emanator causes all of these things, that the entity that experiences the change should be av, v'shafal, v'tachton kalpei ha'matzil, should be lower, coarser, and further down than the emanator. It's this shinui tzura, it's this desire to receive, which causes all of these things. That the ne'etzal should be lower and more coarse and positioned below the matzil. Gam yida'at sheshinui hatzura hazot דהיינו הרצון לקבל אינו נגלה בבת אחת. And you also need to know that this shinui tzura, this change in form, meaning the ratzon לקבל, it is not revealed all at once. Rav Ashlag is saying the netzal is different from the matzil in the sense that the netzal has a desire to receive, but this desire to receive is not revealed all at once. Ela shemid rakam le'at le'at. Rather, it develops gradually. The desire to receive that exists within the netzal, which differentiates it from the matzil, unfolds or reveals itself or develops itself gradually, which means through the 4 phases. That's what he explains. Beseder dalet bechinot, in the order of the 4 phases. V'nigmeret tzurato betachlit hagadlut rak bebechina hadalet. And it reaches its culmination, its full intensity, only in the 4th phase, which is Bechina Dalid of the 4 phases. The 4th phase of these 4 phases is when the Ratzon Lakabel, the desire to receive, is completely revealed and reaches its fullest intensity or fullest revelation. In the 4th phase. So he continues saying that V'lefikach Yotze lanu ki kol shetzurat הרצון לקבל שלו קלושה ביותר, דהיינו הבחינה האלף של דלת הבחינות, הרי היא נבחנת לקרובה יותר אל המעשיל. Rav Ashlag is saying that therefore any being whose desire to receive is still weak, they don't have a strong desire to receive, such as phase number 1. Phase number 1, the desire to receive is very weak. Therefore, the closer it is to the ma'atzil. The weaker the desire to receive, the closer it is to the emanator, to the ma'atzil. Right? I think that makes intuitive sense, because the difference in form is what causes separation from the ma'atzil. So the greater the difference, the greater the separation. But the less the difference, the closer that they are. Have 2 forms, and they are opposite to each other. Therefore, they are as far apart as they can ever possibly be. If they're opposite, that means that they will never ever unite. But if there's something about them that attracts them to each other, which means that there's a certain similarity that they share, just a certain similarity that they share. Therefore, in that specific regard, they are deemed close to one another. If I have a friend, and we both have very different interests, to the extent that we're opposite from each other, we're not going to make very good friends. But if we unite together under a shared interest, something that is similar between the both of us, that despite our differences we put aside and come together, it is around that point of similarity that we are able to come close. Because difference brings distance, while similarity brings closeness. So therefore, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, Bechina Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and Dalid, represent 4 different stages of the unfolding of the Ratzon Lekabel. But only the 4th phase represents the fullest intensity and revelation of the Ratzon Lekabel, which is what differentiates it from the Ma'atzil and separates it from the Ma'atzil. Therefore, the first 3 phases, which are weaker in their level of desire to receive, must be closer to the Ma'atzil than phase 4. V'hi chashuva yoter v'zacha yoter v'elyona yoter. The less the desire to receive, the weaker that the desire to receive is, the more important it is, the purer it is, and the higher it is regarded to be, כי שינוי הצורה שבה אינו כל כך גדול כמו גימל הבחינות שלאחריו. Because the difference in form that exists within it is not as great as it is in the following three phases. So the Ratzon Lekabel within Bechina Aleph is so kalush, it's so weak. Therefore, from all four phases, it is the first phase that is regarded as being closest to the Matzil, while the following three phases, Bechina Bet, Gimel, and Dalid, are regarded lower and more coarse in relationship to the Matzil than Bechina Aleph is. Bechina Aleph is higher, is closer to the Matzil than the following three phases after it. Ve'habechina habet. And phase number 2, sheharatzon sheba gadol mi bechina aleph, the desire to receive in phase number 2 is even greater than bechina aleph. Harei hi nivchenet lerechuka min hamatzil biyoter ve'ava biyoter ve'shafalai biyoter ve'tachtona biyoter min habechina harishona. Phase number 2 is regarded as being further from the matzil, even more so than phase number 1, right? Because she has even more desire to receive than phase number 1. Ve'ava yoter, she's coarser, thicker in terms of the desire to receive. She has more aviyut. Ve'shafala, and she is lower than bechina aleph. Ve'tachtona biyoter, and she is lower up until bechina dalid, which is the greatest and the lowest with the most aviyut and the most distant from the matzil. So aleph is closest, bet is further, gimel is further, and dalit is the furthest from the matzil. וזה שכתוב הרב שהקו נמשך מלמעלה למטה. Rav Ashlag says that this is the meaning of the Rav's words when the Arizal says that the kav nimshach milamala lamata, that the line extends from above to below. What does it mean that the line extends from above to below? Dehainu mi bechinat rishona ad lebechinat hadalid, meaning from phase 1 to phase 4, from the most zach to the most av. Meaning that the kav extends from above to below through the 4 phases, velo ad bichlal. But the kav does not enter bechina dalid, it stops just before bechina dalid. Shehi hatachtona biyoter mikulan. And bechina dalid is the lowest of them all. Ve'inyan ma'ala v'mata ha'amur nitchadesh ata im yetziat hakav. And the whole concept of above and below, mala v'mata, is something that comes about new. It's a new concept. Now that the kav has emerged. Now that the kav, which is a vertical line, extends from above to below, it is only now that the concept of above and below is born. Before the existence of the kav, or rather, before the extension of the kav from the light of Ein Sof into the void, the very concept of above and below did not yet exist. כי בטרם שהאיר הקו, דהיינו בשעת הצמצום, לא נבחן שם מעלה ומטה. Because before the kav illuminated, before the kav shined, meaning at the moment of the tzimtzum, but before the extension of the kav, there was no such thing as above and below. We don't yet recognize or consider any such quality of mala v'mata. There's no differentiation of levels between zakut and aviyut, purity and coarseness. There yet was not this differentiation. Can you scroll the aisle Perek Aleph od Kuf? As I explained earlier in Perek Aleph, chapter 1, ot kuf, letter kuf. אלא אחר שקיבלה האור בבחינת קו לבד, שפירושו שלא קיבלה אותה בכל ד' הבחינות, רק על ג' בחינות ראשונות שבה לבד, ובחינת ד' נשארה חושך בלי אור, הנה רק עתה נגלית בבחינת ד' לבחינה שפלה ועבה ותחתונה. It's saying that only after she received the light in the aspect of a kav, only after the kav extends, which means what? Which means that she didn't receive the kav in all 4 phases, but only in the first 3 phases alone, Bechina Aleph, Bet, and Gimel, where the desire to receive is considerably weaker than Bechina Dalid, which we said previously is the greatest amount of the desire to receive. So therefore, when she extended the kav did not come to inhabit all 4 phases, because the Bechina Dalid was the greatest desire to receive, and if she would receive, then that means that everything would revert to the way it was before the contraction, when the Or Elyon and the Ratzon Mekabel were one in a Achdut Pashut. But the whole point is that the contraction caused a separation between the light and the vessel, and now that the light is being reintroduced into the void that remained after the Tzimtzum, it doesn't inhabit all 4 phases once again, but rather only phases 1, 2, and 3, where the desire to receive is weaker than phase 4, but phase 4 remains empty. It remains choshech, bli or, in a state of darkness without any light whatsoever. It is only now that the line has been extended into the first 3 phases that naglit bechinat dalid lebechina shafla ve'ava v'tachtona. That phase 4 is now revealed in retrospect to be the lowest and the coarsest and the most the most furthest from the Ma'atzil, because before the extension of the Kav, that difference in hierarchical stature between the 4 phases was not yet apparent. Only after the Kav is introduced into the picture, that it extends from Bechina Aleph to Bechina Bet to Bechina Gimel and stops before entering Bechina Dalid, that it is now apparent that Bechina Dalid is lower and worse, not worse in terms of moral quality, but in terms of the stature. It is considerably lower than the previous 3 phases, but that's only recognizable after the introduction of the Kav into the first 3 phases. שעליה נערכות גם כן גימול הבחינות הקודמות לה בכמה שהן זכות וקרובות יותר אל המעציל. And in contrast, what's being said here is that the first 3 phases are also simultaneously now being recognized as being more zach, more elyon, more karov to the Matzil. So this difference in the stature of the Bechinot, whether regarding Bechina Dalid being lower than the previous 3, which in turn also means that the previous 3 are higher than phase 4, that differentiation, that hierarchical system of above and below is only recognized after the Kav enters into the picture. And he finishes here that מה שאין כן בעת הצמצום, that this difference in levels of stature, of zakut and aviyut, purity and coarseness, elyon v'tachton, above and below, was not apparent at the moment of the tzimtzum. at the moment of the Tzimtzum, this hierarchical organization of the Bechinot was not yet apparent. Shenistalek ha'or mikol dalet bechinot bebat achad. If you remember what exactly was the Tzimtzum, it was whenever the Or Ein Sof departed from all four phases at once. The Or Ein Sof, before the Tzimtzum, occupied all of the four Bechinot, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and Dalid, in a seamless unity. There was no way to differentiate Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalid, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, because those differences only became recognizable after the lack that remains after the contraction, but even then it's not yet recognizable. That's what he's saying. It's even at the moment of the Tzimtzum, when the light has departed from all four phases, leaving a lack in all four Bechinot, it is still, even then, not yet recognizable. The difference between the four phases. Because the light left all four phases at once. Therefore, they were still in a seamless sort of unity amongst themselves, albeit they are completely without the Or Ein Sof. But nevertheless, all four phases are seamless, and they are one and integrated with one another in a seamless unity, albeit without the light. So therefore, since they are all considered still one organism that are not different from one another, whose levels have not yet been differentiated from one another in terms of above and below, Zakut and Aviut, therefore even still, at the moment of the Tzimtzum, that difference, that hierarchical difference, is not yet recognizable. Lo haya od haheker hazeh bein bechinot. This recognition did not yet exist between the Bechinot. Can you scroll la'al Perek Aleph Ot Kuf, as mentioned in chapter 1, Ot Kuf, letter Kuf. So this pretty much summarizes the commentary of the Or Pnimi on the phrase from the Arizal that the line extends from Mala Lamata. In essence, we're saying here that after the Tzimtzum, a vacated space, a halal, was created in the center of the Or Ein Sof. And this empty space allows for the creation to take place. What was not possible before the contraction, since there was no space where in which the creation could be made. And it is specifically into this space that a single line of light, what we call in Hebrew a kav, was drawn down from above to below, meaning that it was drawn from the most refined level of desire, which is closest to the Matzil, to the coarsest level, being Bechina Dalet itself, the most self-oriented and the greatest desire to receive. Because Bechina Aleph has the smallest amount of desire to receive, Bechina Bet has a little bit more, therefore it's lower. Bechina Gimel has even more, therefore it's lower. And Bechina Dalet has the most, therefore it is lowest. But we are also remembering, very important, that these terms of above and below are not spatial, they're not physical, but rather they're spiritual, because above means zakut, refers to purity, refined desire, more similar to God, while below means aviut, it's more self-centered and spiritually distant from God. All four phases were equal, not only before the Tzimtzum, but also at the moment of the Tzimtzum. But once the Kav illuminated the first three phases, it's only then that it is recognizable that there is a qualitative difference in terms of the stature of the preceding three phases and in relationship to the fourth phase. And therefore the process of creation and the process of Hashem emanating His light into the void is really a structured development of desire. Gradually moving from pure giving, which is what Hashem, the light, desires to give, to share, to illuminate, to full receiving, which is the nature of the souls. The nature of the souls that God creates and emanates is that they desire to receive their own sustenance from Hashem. And this development defines all the spiritual worlds, all the way down to this world, which is the most coarse and the most av and the most shafal and the most tachton of all of the worlds. Hence why it is physical. The physical world, this corporeal realm. The reason why it is this way is because it is the most coarse and what you might call condensed level of the desire to perceive. This is the Nekudam Sayit, in a certain sense. We are living in the centermost world. This is where Hashem desires to be revealed. It is specifically here that Hashem desires to dwell and become revealed. That's our work, to prepare this world, to build this world, to fix this world, in order to make Hashem feel welcome in His own world, in His own kingdom, which is what we're all hoping and waiting for and praying for. The arrival of Mashiach, the construction of the third temple, the eradication of evil, and a life of peace, joy, oneness, truth, where we go from tov leyoter tov, from good to better. There will no longer be this struggle of good and evil. We'll have rectified ourselves and refined ourselves as we are currently in the process of doing. But by that point, that work has already been done. And there will only be greatness upon greatness. Od yoter tov ve'od yoter tov. To God knows what's next. Only God knows what comes after. It's exciting stuff. And we're privileged to be a part of this, and we're privileged to be able to learn this study, Talmud Eser Sefirot, which is training our mind and training our faculties to pick up on these spiritual sensitivities that exist regardless of your perception, regardless of your knowledge, but nevertheless are waiting for you to grow enough desire to learn it, to know it, and use it to improve your life and uplift the world. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in next week's class.